I'm gonna sit next to you, Marc. I'll take that seat. Can I just use my thing?
Yeah, you can use it. All right, thank you. I thought that was a really good actually sequence also of talks. Because you know, we talked specifically about place. I like that we added the layer of density, Emily. But I also like that we added the layer of governance. But maybe I'll go back to our panel and the panel before. So we've seen pictures of, and this is the debate part for me. We've seen pictures of Paris, Vienna, Manhattan, DC, and Venice. But I know when you look at data about where people are moving or where people live, whether it's in the US or China or India or Lagos or Durban, it doesn't look like that. And it can look a little nostalgic for a kind of placemaking that I think we're used to, that we travel to. So I guess one of my questions is, um, are the people, when they actually inhabit places, seeing benefits that don't look like the places we're showing? And does the data support the vision we're seeing up here in terms of outcomes, whether it be happiness or health outcomes or other things? And if those are different, is there a way to reconcile them?
Tricky question to start off with, but
For the record, I don't know the answer.
yeah. Well, I always struggle. I mean, I struggle every day with this normative thinking about this issue. What ought to be happening? You know, in the urban planning world, we do have sets of rules about good placemaking, or places, not the placemaking part. Well, that has its own set of rules too, but how, in a lot of contexts, what I was talking about, it's, as I said, it's not going to be relevant to, you know, a lot of many different parts of the world. But then on the other hand, if we give up on these normative principles in some parts of the world, and we just kind of say place is whatever is in one's personal imagination, are we then you know, just legitimizing anything? And are we not bringing to it some sense of good and bad when it comes to place? That's what I struggle with all the time. David?
I guess
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you really had me thinking about, you know, how images are used in this, and why we often, and I guess I've learned this from the planners and architects that I hang out with. You end up using examples of places that are very often not North American,
Yeah.
that are nostalgic. And the thing about nostalgia is that nostalgia is, to some extent, you know, it's a feeling that has to do with a sense of loss and a desire for a place where the heart can feel at home. And I don't think nostalgia is necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I think really sort of facing up to that desire and clarifying it is part of what maybe has to happen if we're going to empower and enable the different kinds of placemaking process. I mean, I think that if people are not moving to places that look like the images that we've been showing, other than Emily's images are pretty positively mundane. Right? That's a good thing.
Yeah, nostalgic.
And, you know, I was thinking, I wanted to know some of the places. There was one image of a place I wasn't sure where it was, and I like the way you use Google Earth. But I think that sort of recognizing the qualities of place and the qualities of, you know, good and bad of places is part of getting to where we could actually do better at it, and sort of shake people out of the feeling that the places that we're moving to, we have a tendency to move for a lot of different reasons, and not because they look like a place where we really want to live necessarily. But there's a lot of constraints, and so I think, you know, it's a big part of that, as I said, enabling and empowering, that was somehow we have to really work at the level of imagination. What are the places? And, and Emily's, I thought, really did a nice job of clarifying a connection that if people understood that better, we'd have different conversations in those public meetings about density.
I have a mic, so I
Okay.
can give this one back to mine. There are like a lot of layers to your question, and so I don't feel like I can answer it like completely right now. But like, if I'll offer a few different things that come to mind. Like the first is that people are people all over the world. Pretty sure I'm quoting a song. And like great places are about a density not of architecture but of people. And so you will find that everywhere in the world, and more so actually than in North America, the most dependent part of the world, right? That like where people are moving globally is to cities because of economic trends. And in those places, the vast majority of people can't afford to consume a ton of square feet in their home, right? They're consuming a fifth of what the average American is, and they don't have cars. And they create all kinds of incredible places because of those basic realities. And there's a lot that we can learn from those places in the rest of the world. But you're also alluding at the same time to the fact that in the United States, a majority of the population lives in suburbs. And this question of like, are there suburban places? Or can we create suburban places? We have to answer that question, because if what we're interested in is meeting the needs of people, then their needs have to be met where they are. And the suburbs have to change in order for people's needs to be met resiliently. It will already in the United States, the trend that's happening is that suburbs themselves are urbanizing and are on a different spatial scale, and in some ways becoming a little bit more like cities. And everything about climate change, and also just the fiscal cost of actually sustaining places is going to mean that trend will be accelerated in the future, I think.
Well, I mean, I particularly liked, Emily, your slides about sort of the different kinds of places and different densities. And I'm wondering if, to the point about suburban places, it seems like you can get some good placemaking, but there are also trade-offs, right? So it's like the placemaking is a lot of times in privatized spaces, right? The lifestyle center, et cetera, or the kind of amenities within the gated community with the homeowners association or whatever else, which of course excludes a lot of people. But I'm wondering if, I mean, it seems like the suburbs are learning lessons from cities, doing it in a different way. And maybe that gets to your point, Tracy, about being able to change, right? Because for one reason or another, we're seeing new subdivisions that are changing to try to become more place centered or place like. But I'm wondering, have you seen good examples of that change, right? Because even in places like New York City, I was at those hearings. There are some people living in very dense places that don't want to give up parking minimums. They are not compromising. And they're not compromising on additional density. So I'm wondering, like, what are some of the techniques you've seen to actually get people to change that sort of to, I don't know, be more complex and more open to other ways of living?
Well, I'm very focused on cities, and what I usually say is if suburbanites want to have their wide open spaces and not a lot of, no transit, no density around parks, pedestrian oriented retail streets, fine, do what you need to do. But in the city, we have so much that needs to be done in existing cities, in terms of getting these equations right about where density is and how it's close to public assets. I feel like we have our work cut out for us. And so I don't spend a lot of time in suburbs. Luckily, I have colleagues like Ellen Dunham Jones and June Williamson who are all about the suburbs and how to make them better and have more place in suburban areas. So I'm not a good person to ask. I have that attitude.
I don't think there has to be one suburban answer to this and one urban answer to this. So like I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but like this is like also about ownership. Right? That like if you want a place to places accept change when it's their change. Right. And they don't accept change when it's someone else's change. Right. So this is about how communities are constructed in terms of like who's included and who's excluded, who benefits, who does not benefit, who has power, who does not, who is involved in sharing power, who is not involved. And if you want to get a different outcome, you need to change the terms of the engagement around how power is shared and who has control and who receives returns. We can and have in the past created new structures for literally doing that. So big chunk of my work, for example, is about new ownership structures for commercial real estate and changing how commercial real estate is done so that a different set of holders not just have a say, but receive a return from it. Because I think that it redefines the problem, and that's what gets you to a different outcome.
Interesting. Yeah. So I have an example of a project where it was 2 quadrants of a freeway interchange that were going to be redeveloped, and there was a proposal to develop them in a more kind of urban way, and the nearby large lot subdivisions all turned out to oppose that, and there was big controversy going on, and so my friends and I worked these populations through a series of workshops with the developers and the landowners, starting with, well, let's see what will happen to these pieces of land if they just develop business as usual under the current zoning structure and with current development practices. What's that going to look like? We worked through a series of imagining that kind of thing, and we kind of got to the place where the stakeholders who had been coming out absolutely opposed to anything happens. Why can't these cow pastures just stay there forever, right? Well, they're not gonna. And so what can be done? So by the time we ended this series of workshops, not only did we have approval for a comprehensive plan change, a comprehensive plan amendment, but written into the comprehensive plan amendment were a series of agreements that the stakeholders had come to about what needed to happen and not happen on these properties. And it seemed to me that they worked to a place where they said, okay, we need density, but we need it in a different form. We don't want gas stations and big box retail. We want something different. And we sort of showed them how different sorts of planning tools could get them what they wanted. And I think my favorite part was writing into the comprehensive plan this series of 12 things, guiding principles that the stakeholders came up with and agreed on. So I think there are ways to have a transformative impact on these, this area in Florida is really where large lot subdivisions of deed restricted communities, and that's everywhere. So the change is very hard when you have that kind of pattern. So working people through this process where you can actually show them that change can be managed towards a positive outcome makes a huge difference.
And you said public participation was so flawed, but you found a way to make it work.
If you don't do the standard public hearing where you say, this is what we're thinking of doing, what do you guys think? And just let people throw tomatoes at it, the
Yeah.
usual process that just created the conflict to begin with. Right? The usual process had actually, we manufacture the NIMBY politics in the conventional public process. That's not something that just naturally emerges. The public process actually cultivates, NIMBY activism, or, bananas, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything, which is what a lot of these people were.
So I have about 17 more questions and about 12 more minutes. So I want to make sure that we get to questions, if anybody has one, either online or in the audience, before I ask my next question. There's one back there, and then we'll take these two up here.
Hi. This was really insightful, and I tried to word it in the best way possible. So forgive me if I don't. My question was, in today's socio-political climate where everything is like so information heavy, like maintenance of our intersecting identities and the promotion of cultural identities is often seen and emphasized as a process of placemaking. So based on your personal and professional experiences, how would you say we, meaning the mentioned co-partnerships or the top-down, support those processes and encourage them to occur, um, without sort of isolating or excluding ourselves from each other?
Interesting. So it's specifically around sort of like how maybe diverse communities maintain their identity but share public space. Maybe is that part of the question?
I think this is such an interesting question. So, David, you offered a principle on one of your final slides about honoring diversity, I think was the word that you used. And I was so interested by that because I think that if anything, you didn't go far enough. That, if we, like, I'm obsessing about like this transition from like the 60s to the present and how like it's a different world and we need different tools and a different set of rules. And one thing that's happened in the United States is the transition from a majority white society into, in most places, a much more diverse mix in which there is no majority racial group. And they're like literal skills that we need that we don't have because we've never had to do it before, about not just honoring diversity, but like embodying, managing, embracing. Like it's not just cute, it's everywhere and it's everything now. And it does feel like we're not that good at it yet.
Interesting. I think we had some questions in the front.
Yeah, thanks for the great conversation. I wonder if you have some perspectives on how placemaking ideas can be envisaged in relation to the different processes and principles you outlined in what has become known as the abundance agenda. I think hopeful Harris government is planning 3 million new houses is one of their main, like number one, is like the number one policy. In the UK, the current government promised 1.5 million, which is massively more per given the population. But if that turns into some of these pictures of non-dense, non-place, just houses built to address some supply problem, then we'll be in all kinds of problems environmentally and socially. So I wonder if we have a place as collaboratively to address those with these new places. There's going to be an abundance of placemaking necessary.
I worry about that. Like, where are all these 3 million housing units gonna go? That's a huge part of the equation. Are they gonna be near transit, near parks, near pedestrian streets, or are they gonna be out in the middle of the suburbs with no transit? That's actually gonna add, it's gonna increase a lot of other problems. So I do really worry about that, and I think, I don't know, maybe there's a role for a heightened sensitivity to the place needs of adding more density. That would be my hope. I hope somebody in the Harris administration, if she wins, is going to be thinking about that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I do think also, I mean, it's a great point because all of these things kind of fit into existing frameworks, right? For finance, for regulation, for all sorts of things. So they're probably going to be single family and suburban, right? I mean, unless we do something about it, right? I mean, you saw that with the infrastructure bill. It's like, that's great, but a lot of it is highway widening because that's what we do all the time. And those are the projects that are ready, and those are the things people know how to finance. So I do think this is probably the moment to, or when we have the moment to like actually get those things written in the bill that, right, that it's walkable or dense or transit oriented or affordable or whatever else it is.
And we can just remember how much of the landscape was that we currently see was the creation of that post World War II effort to provide housing, well, actually during World War II effort to provide housing for the defense related industries, and then afterwards where everybody came back and wanted to get married and started having babies, so we have all this housing being mass produced, and it created this sort of shift in the landscape. And so we do have this tendency to try to not think about the fact that it matters where stuff goes, right? And that's, and I'm thinking lately I've been thinking about the small cities in northern Indiana. So I'm working with Notre Dame, and they have two kinds of problems. They have the problem that they haven't had enough growth. They've been, depopulated, and then the problem of growth, both of which have had a destructive influence. So how do you help a mayor decide that they're going to fix the problem of actually, well, we haven't had enough growth, so we need growth, and we're going to have growth, it's going to mess things up. And we've had too much growth and it's messed things up. So it's a problem of thinking about how you grow and where you grow, and really being friendly with density and as a tool of placemaking, right?
Oh, a question.
Oh, I just want to bring up one question that was from the Q&A chat online. So Catherine asks, what role does density play in the opposite of the doom loop?
In the opposite of what?
Doom loop that Emily brought up. I'm sorry, Tracy brought up.
Okay. Okay, so I think that actually, like, Emily was getting at that in her presentation where she was talking about how, like, places and these public assets, they need density in order to sustain them. Right? Like, transit authorities need fair revenue and ridership, right? That, like, parks need eyes on them and parks caring about them. That retail commercial corridors need customers, right? So, the opposite of doom loop is like this, a vision of people not spending all of their time in their homes and instead, like, being out there, engaging in and using these shared assets, right? Because like because these assets don't, they're because they're shared, they don't sustain themselves without these communities. And so literally the bigger the community is, the broader the shoulders to bear the cost of these shared kinds of infrastructure are.
So how do you do that without population growth?
I mean, you don't, right? So like, people are still having babies, like
Less.
there's, yeah,
Yeah.
but right. And so like figuring out like, you know, where we are most likely to grow, where the economy is growing, and then how to better support. Like my concern, to be honest with you, like more than is housing going to be near, all of this like placemaking stuff they need is also like housing actually needs to be near jobs. So like everything's really going to fall apart. And so like better aligning the trends that are happening in our economy with land use planning, I think that's the critical challenge for local governments right now.
Great. Is this our last question, or we have a little more time? Okay, great.
Thanks. Well, this panel has raised so many questions. I also have 17 questions like Marc. I just want to say one thing and then ask one thing. You would think that New York City, which has tremendously dense construction, would be the opposite example of suburbanization, but increasingly new multi-dwelling buildings, apartment houses, suburbanize in the sense that they include all kinds of amenities for their residents that uh, keep them in place. They don't have to go out to the local public library because there's a library in the building, or they don't have to go to an external co-working space because there's a co-working space in the building. Naturally, these are more expensive apartment houses, but there's an increasing number of them that privatize what should be public amenities, and yet because they bring more residents, at least part-time residents, into the city, they exert a greater cost on streets, congesting the streets with car traffic, other things. So this is a suburban urban dichotomy is confounding now. But let me ask a question, and this comes from something Emily said. She's working on the examples that you gave of good bottom up and semi bottom up taking command of public space and re-envisioning it, redirecting it for better public use. Community gardens, park conservancies, business improvement districts or business improvement associations, leaving aside the question of which of those have a more elite influence on the uses of public space. Why do you think they were successful? I mean, they were very problematic in their time, and for the next 20 years. How do you think they could serve as models or inspirations to citizen organizing today?
Well, organizing is the magic word, right? That like I think right now, I feel like I see in a lot of places like a desire to like find some way to get stuff done without having to organize. But like that seems like a lot of work. What if I just tweet it harder? Like I think that there's a desire to just like is there some way that I could get stuff done without having to work with anyone who disagrees with me? Like there's like everyone is just trying to like find that one weird trick that's not out there. And so, what any form of collaboration has in common is that it is more than one person, right? That it's people working together, pooling resources, and at times compromising. And that's the messiness that we need more of, and more layered on top of more. And well, I think the desire is right now in this time of great division is for less.
Can I just provide a thought on the first part of your question? Which is, I think, to the kind of maybe suburban elements of new developments in dense places. There is a kind of convergence happening, right? Because if your phone can get you all of these things, it's going to change the way you interact and the way you live. I mean, I'm always surprised at how many people use DoorDash or Uber Eats in a place where literally there's 17 restaurants on their block, but You know, maybe it's just a lot to go downstairs, but the other thing this was going to be my last question. The other thing I haven't seen in the slides is everybody's like sitting down and having coffee and in a piazza. But when you go to public spaces, part of this is about over tourism that you see in some of those places and other places is like there are people taking TikToks and there's a lot of people on their phones. They're using those spaces very differently, the public spaces. And I think they're also using home differently too, and those things might be blurring. And so I am curious to kind of, tease out at some point, like, what is the nature and the use of the good places we're creating when, so much of our lives can be like we can be in a place and other places at the same time.
Let's go someplace cool and look at our phones. The other day, I actually asked the AI to produce an image of an active public space, and every image had a bunch of people looking at their phones. I couldn't believe it. It was so weird. But to me, the hopeful stuff that I've seen has to do with it was working with the city of Bradenton, and they were worried about how do we keep young talent here? Because nobody wants to stay there. There's nothing for us. Well, there was a group of millennials, and they were all starting businesses, and they formed this network, and their goal was to create a downtown where they could thrive. That's how they defined it. And they created this network of people that they were trying to recreate an entrepreneurial ecology, as they called it. And I just thought that was the coolest thing to have people say, okay, we want to own this city. We want this city to be our city, a place where we can live, we can raise up our kids and raise them right. That kind of stuff it's a very different version, or maybe an older version of the American dream that I thought was really interesting. Linking, the economy to the social world and to placemaking. And they began to do placemaking projects that were not really about bringing in the experts, but about, how can we create the place that we want to live in? And I think that's, to me, the most fun to see that kind of stuff.
Can we take one last question?
Yeah, I have one more thing I want to add there, which is like, I'm like exactly old enough to like share your sense of bewilderment about like DoorDash usage, but also young enough to understand that like, actually, I think a lot of these digital tools and platforms will end up strengthening places, right? So like, for example, in retail, like there's this concept of that like, if you offer an online shopping option, like from a store, that it will actually increase the in-person retail sales that happen at the location. It's like it's paradoxical, but this is like a real phenomenon that actually happens in retail. The ability to DoorDash gives restaurants, which still have to physically exist in order to make food and take it gives them a new customer base in addition to their in-person customer base, which actually makes the restaurant, it diversifies their revenue and makes them stronger than ever. Dating online. You don't literally like the entire process is not online. Like you are a young person and you haven't yet met the person that you want to marry, you need to be in a place that will bring you into a reasonable actual physical proximity to other young people. Even if the pairing is happening in an app, at some point you do get together in real life. And so there's online sex all the time. So I'm sure there's some like dystopian version of this that we can come up with where no one ever touches each other ever again.
Let's not envision that place right now.
I'm not too worried about that. And I actually think that as funny as it is how we're all like Instagramming our way through public spaces now, that actually the trend is that the rise of the internet and the ubiquity of information is actually like making places more popular than ever. Like that, now everyone knows about everywhere. And so actually the challenge is I can't go anywhere and be by myself because I literally, like, I went to like an enormous national park, hiked out to the end of a trail by myself to watch a sunset, and then like a young couple came along to like take Instagram photos of the sunset. You can't, because everyone knows about everything now.
Tracy, can I make a final and well, a final question and a very annoying comment that I think, to your point, when Instagram makes some places more popular ever, I think there's an inequality of exposure of places. You know, we all want to go to that one donut shop. So, final question.
I don't have the answer to the Instagram or the DoorDash, but I work in a lot of shrinking cities or cities that aren't growing. And pedestrian environments and getting rid of cars. You know, in Buffalo, if you had like half the number of cars here, people would be walking. And when people walk, that's when they shop. And that's when they go out to eat. So I would say maybe we could talk more about this the next session, but getting people and making places where walking is possible. And it's not always easy in a place like Buffalo to walk, but to promote walking and getting people out of their cars, you don't have to grow a city. You can change the dynamic and the prosperity of those cities just by making that change to a more pedestrian environment.
Right, and it's also like critical for, we're not gonna like electric vehicle our way out of climate change. We're definitely fantasizing and creating federal policy to indicate that we're gonna do that, but the numbers don't actually work out.
Well, probably a good place to end. So thank you, Tracy, Emily, David.